My name is Zuill. I'm a software developer. I've been writing software for about 35 or 36 years. And I'm going to share with you today this story of mob programming and the power of flow. Flow, the idea of flow is very critical to me now, but when we first started working this way, I really didn't know what the benefits were or why it was working. We just knew it was good. So what I want to share first of all is this little slide I put at the beginning of all of my talks. It basically is to tell you, I can't tell you what to do or whether or not you should do it. I can just share with you what we did and why we do it. And it's up to you to decide what works for you. I'm going to give a really rapid introduction to mob programming. I'm going to look across here and see how many of you have known of mob programming before this conference. So most of you. So you don't need much of an introduction. I'm going to go pretty fast. And you can find introductions that have been recorded at other conferences. Mob programming is all the brilliant minds working together on the same thing at the same time and in the same space. And this basically allows us to collaborate well. That's why we work this way. And this is sort of what Agile is about. Let's find ways to accentuate or highlight our ability to collaborate well. But with mob programming, we're all sitting at the same computer. We're going to gather together all the knowledge, all the skills, all the capabilities we need so we can get our work done more directly. And we'll see what that's like. It looks like this. You saw the video. It's not 5 people watching, 1 person programming. We use this idea of driver navigators. We need some kind of guidelines to follow to keep it from being chaotic. But overall, we just have a few very simple kind of guidelines. One of them is we're going to have somebody at the keyboard who's the driver, and everyone else is a navigator. The navigators are figuring out where we're going step by step, and the driver's putting that into the computer. Essentially, we follow this guideline from Llewellyn Falco. I really like this. For an idea to go from someone's head into the computer, it must go through someone else's hands. And when we do that, it really indicates to us we need to be communicating well. We need to be collaborating. That's what this is about. It's not one person sitting at the keyboard and everyone else just sitting and watching them work. So this seems crazy or preposterous. How could this possibly work? Well, first of all, I'm going to show you a bunch of a bunch of slides really quickly, and you're just going to see different people around the world working this way. This is where we first started at Hunter Industries. We started with that one team you saw, and now they have something like 7 or 8 teams, maybe more. Here's a group in Alaska, a group in the UK, London, Boston, Stockholm, Unruly in London. This is a class being taught at Harvard. Here's a group in Zito in California. They wanted me to show me how little it takes to manage 6 teams of work when they're working this way. The CTO of the company showed me this and said that's all they need to manage these 6 people or 6 teams of people. Here's a group in South Africa. I will show south of the equator, everyone sits in this direction. You saw north of the equator, they're all in that direction. There must be a scientific reason, but I'd like to know what that is. So there we go. This is not mob programming. This was in 1960, I think, this picture. But that's Grace Hopper. And it looks to me like it's all the brilliant minds working together on the same thing at the same time. They kind of maybe knew that this was important way back then. I was just a little kid at that time. This is a group in Sweden, Germany, France. This is actually a users group where they sort of invented some of the ideas of how we work this way. And we adopted those, and it turned into our way of working daily. Another group in France. They're sitting in the opposite direction. No, let's see. So this is a group in Sweden. I like to point this out. I'll use this. All the whiteboards everywhere. They work a lot. And when you're working as a team, you're going to be needing a place to keep your ideas further than the amount of time it takes you to say them. And if you put them on the whiteboard, that's a really good way to do that. A group in Japan, I really love that picture. I met at 3 different teams in Japan that are working this way. Interesting. This is a group doing it remotely. So clearly it can be done remotely as well. I've worked on and off over the last 4 or 5 years with teams remotely, and it can work rather well as well. It's just that you have to figure out a slightly different way of thinking about, the same place. So this is not programming, but this is the same idea taken from a point of view of a mission. This is NASA Mission Control. They've gathered together all the skills and knowledge that you need to do this work, to do this mission. And some of the people are remote, and some of the people are in this room. Everybody there has a skill. It's different than the other people. It's not a bunch of the same skill. We're going to integrate skills of all sorts that we need to do this work. So this is very important. So why would we work this way? I usually do this as an exercise. I ask, why would we work this way? I don't have time to do that in this talk today, but essentially when I do this exercise, these are some of the things people bring up. There's a lot of knowledge sharing, continuous code and design review, many perspectives on the work. This kind of results in better solutions and rapid feedback. We get this focus on the right things. With the whole team there, we stop working on the wrong things. We quickly discover what's the right things to work on. It enhances the flow of the work and eliminates queues and excess inventory. I'll talk a lot about that today. It ends up with better solutions. And the higher quality, when I worked there 3.5 years after we started mob programming, as far as we could determine, there were only 3 bugs introduced into our bug tracking system that made it to production. We pretty much eliminated bugs. And what we found was that the work, and we did about 20, 30, 40 projects or things of work during that time. The work is vetted. By the time it's deployed, it's fully tested because the tester's working on the team with us. And it's more fun. So any of these qualities makes it worth trying, and that's why we did it. But why would we work this way? This little twist on that. This is for the managers here. Why would we work this way? Because the team decided to work this way. We hire these brilliant people, and then we tell them where to sit, who to work with, what they're going to work on, when they're going to come in, when they get to leave. All sorts of stuff we tell them, but the team can figure that out for themselves. That's why it's so much easier to manage a team of people that are doing mob programming as opposed to a bunch of individuals. Now, I'm going to walk over this side of the stage because I rarely walk around the stage while I'm doing a talk. And this is perfect for doing that. So I'm going to practice that. So every time I do mob programming talk like this one, I get a question, something like this. How can you be productive with 5 people at one computer? And at first I would say, I don't know, does that matter? Who really cares? The first time I gave this talk in 2012, or a version of a talk on mob programming, the first question I was asked was, how can you be productive with 5 people at one computer? And I looked at the group and I said, I don't really care about that. What I do notice is that we were paying attention, and this is what we found. When we worked separately and we added up the work of those separate people, we would get a certain amount of work done. But when we worked together, we got a whole lot more work done. And it wasn't just more work. It was the more important stuff, the stuff that was more meaningful to our users. Interestingly to me, we were also doing it to a better degree. So in other words, the solutions were more, the result of our solutions was easier to use by our end users. We had our code in a cleaner state, so it was easier to work on. We were coming up with better architectures and better solutions. And we were getting the higher quality I already talked about. So we were getting these benefits. It's not just about getting more stuff done. Matter of fact, I would say, if we were getting the exact same amount of stuff done, and we still enjoyed more working this way, then I would say there's probably no reason to not work this way. However, I still felt I needed to come up with an answer. And as a group with my team, we started talking about this. How can we share what is causing this? Why is it better for us? And it really has to do with systems. I'm not going to go in too much detail about this because we're going to expand on the idea quite a bit. But the essence of a system is, it's not the parts, adding up the behavior of the parts, it's the product of the interactions. And that's what Agile's about, making it easy for people to have fruitful interactions. So, how can we be productive with 5 people at one computer? To me, wasn't a very good question. I didn't like the question being about productivity. This is my father, before I met him, and he would say this, a good question isn't for answers, it's for finding a better question. And when you land on that better question, you'll know it. You'll know it when you find it. So whenever you see this picture of him in this, I'm kind of channeling stuff I learned from him. He was an engineer in the phone company. He did switching stations and stuff like that. I don't know all that he used to do, but he used to tell me stories, and I think he was a pretty good, essentially, an engineer. So I wanted a better question based on the way he would have told me. This wasn't such a good question. I want to improve it slightly. This doesn't move us to the great question I'm after, but it gets us a start. So I want to talk about productivity. Productivity, I just didn't like that word in there. When we say when we say how can we be productive, I don't really care about productivity. So I'm going to talk about these three things real quickly. First of all, efficiency is about utilization. Productivity is about getting stuff done, and effectiveness is about getting the right things done, or meaningful things done. The reason that I'm after effectiveness rather than these two other things is that we can essentially measure for efficiency just by busy work. Is everybody working? That's not necessarily a good thing. For productivity, by are things getting done? That's not necessarily a good thing. And then effectiveness, are we getting the right things done? So this is what I want to do. So I want to change that original saying. I'm going to move through these slides pretty quick. They keep me from getting bogged down on anything. So if you're going to take pictures, just hold your phone up and hold the thing down and just take a lot of pictures. So how can we be effective with 5 people at one computer is a better question. But it's not what my dad meant by finding a better question. This is a little bit better, but it's not where I want to be yet. So his technique for doing this essentially is about point of view. The first thing you have to do is understand the point of view of the person who asked the question. The person who thinks working separately is going to be more effective. So essentially, they say things like this. I want to get 5 things done, not 1 thing done. But I kind of would ask back, do you mean you want to get 5 things worked on? Because when you separate the people, are they getting the work done? Or are they just working on this stuff? And then I want to ask, they will often say this as well. I don't want to pay 5 people for doing the work of 1, but we're not doing the work of 1. And I'll explain a little bit about that. Essentially, we are going to share the cognitive load. So we're going to have 5 or 6 people's brains working on one thing. It's 5 or 6 people's work to get that thing done. That story done. Those stories are usually done by a number of people. So let's flip this over as what my father would say. We know the point of view of the person asking the question. Let's ask the question from an opposite point of view. And this is the question I came up with. This is still not a better question. This is just an alternative from the opposite point of view. How can we be effective if we separate the people that should be working together? And it usually ends up being not just in separate places. They're in different departments. The database person's in one department, the programmers are in another department, the testers are in another department, the product owners are in another department. So to get together and work is quite a feat for them. So we have to be really cautious about this. So can we be effective separating those people? This now gives us a better question, because we can look at it from both of those 2 points of view, and we can come up with a better question. And the question that I came up with, and I wish my father was alive now because I'd like to talk to him about this, is this enough better? But this is the question. What are the things that destroy effectiveness? So if we can have a list of the things that destroy effectiveness and compare different ways of working and see if we have those problems in these different ways of working, we can kind of judge then, well, the one that has less of these problems might be a better way of working. So that's a beginning. We've eliminated, or what if we could eliminate, the things that destroy effectiveness. And I usually do as an exercise. This was a 3-minute exercise with 20 people at a company in Boston. Before they started mob programming, I asked them, what are the things that destroy effectiveness for you? And in 3 minutes, they came up with 50 or 51 things. I don't know how many are there. It's over 50, I think. What are these things? Well, I looked these over, and actually, to me, they're mostly symptoms of problems. But there's still things that are just occurring that are harming our ability to be effective. I'll read a couple off there. Fatigue and hunger. Too much noise. Too quiet. Needless meetings. I would take needless off of that. Just meetings. External dependencies. Dependency on other teams. Distractions. On and on. not knowing how to do something. All sorts of things are going to destroy our ability to get our work done effectively. So what happened when we started mob programming, or starting to work well together, we noticed many of these things faded away. And I spent a long time putting together this animation, so watch closely. Many things faded away when we started working as a team. Pretty impressive, eh? Okay, so this is a troubling thing to me because if we're not paying attention to that, then we may not keep doing the things that are good to do. So once we found this was happening, we were paying a lot of attention, and the team decided, let's do more. So right at the beginning, the very first day, we noticed we got a lot done. It was very high quality. We were learning a lot, and we were having fun. And we didn't talk about any of the problems that were coming up because there weren't any. We just got through the work really quickly. Some of those things we'll cover in a minute. One of the many communication problems that I want to share, because a lot of those things on that list have to do with communication. At the root of a lot of those problems is difficulties in communicating. I think I need to add some more about these communication problems, but in a talk this long, we're going to try to cover it without me talking too much more about the other problems. I want to talk about the primary one, and it's one that I call the question queue time. And this came to me in a research we were doing at a company I was working at where they had a lot of communication problems, and we were going to try and help them figure out how do we eliminate some of these problems. And the big one, the one that was wasting the most time, was the question queue time. The amount of time that we must wait to get an answer to a question that is blocking us. Now, when I do this at a company, I try to not find out what the amount of time they need to wait is. But we got a bunch of people from all over the place. How long does it take you to wait to get an answer to a question that's blocking you? It's not something you can look up on Google. You can't go to Google and say, the product owner said we need 2 drop-downs, but I can only figure out how one would be useful, so I need to figure out what does he want in that other drop-down. You can't ask Google that. They know the answer. They're just not going to tell you they know the answer, right? Because they don't want you to know how much they know about our companies. Does that make sense to you, though? So how long does it take to get that answer from the product owner or a team member when you're not working together with them? Shout it out. Half a day. What else? A day. 2 to 3 days. But we immediately went up from half day to the day range. I worked at a place where it took a week because we could only meet with the people who could answer those questions every Monday for an hour and a half. And by the end of Monday, we were blocked again. A blocking question is a question you can't do more work on that particular thing until you get the answer. That's why it's blocking. Okay, so waiting is waste. So usually I hear somewhere about 2 hours to about 2 days. That's the average. And I think we kind of came in pretty close to that. So if the waiting is waste, we should understand about this waiting. And so we actually use value stream maps to map this out. If the green line at the top, often they do it the opposite, where the value is at the bottom. But in this case, the value is at the top because of the way I want to use this slide. And the red, or the line across the bottom, indicates we're not getting any work done because we're waiting to get the answer. So if we use a value stream map, like in this case, where green is we're working, and then blue, we get this blue line, and then it says it's red, we're waiting to get an answer. And there's some context switching that's going to go on in that time. We got to write some emails, and so on across the way. Okay, so if we use this to make an example of, hypothetically, for every hour we work, we get a blocking question. Now we can determine how much waste is in our system. If it typically takes us 0 time to get the answer, then we're going to go from beginning to end without any waiting whatsoever. What if it takes us 2 minutes? What if it takes us 10 minutes? We're already wasting 1/8 of the day. What if it only takes us an hour? We're wasting half the day. What if it takes us all day? We've wasted the day. So it's really critical to understand this and have a way to measure it. The value stream map makes that pretty easy. So how do we typically solve for this? We've got this thing that we're working on and we're getting blocked. What do we usually do in your company? Work on something else. We're going to work on something else that's called inventory. We're going to increase inventory so that we can stay busy. But inventory, a definition of inventory is anything we've worked on that isn't yet delivering value. That is, that our customer is not using it. The more inventory we have, guess what? The more waste we have. I'm going to make it real clear here. When we do this, it looks like it's green all the time, but we're also blocked all the time. So it looks like we're being effective now, but what did we actually do? The inventory is waste. I really want to emphasize this. What we've done is we've worked on a symptom instead of on a problem. We addressed the symptom, which is we're not busy enough, and not the problem, which is we're blocked on getting answers quickly. So what do we do about this? How did we solve for this? That's a trick question. Because we didn't solve for it. It simply faded away. We didn't try to solve this problem. It stopped happening when we worked as a team like this, except for one person, and that was our product owner. So we now identified the big bottleneck was getting answers from our product owners. If we get an answer very quickly from them, like say in a minute, we could deliver stuff really rapidly throughout the day. We actually had a couple product owners come to us and they said, hey, you didn't deliver anything yesterday. They were getting used to us delivering every day. And a couple different product owners. And we said, yeah, because we sent you messages, we had a question for you, and you wouldn't respond. So we had to go and work on something else. At that time, we were time slicing between different projects or applications for different groups in the company. So we would just move to somebody else's work because we didn't want to be, so, we're bringing on that inventory, but we didn't have a choice. We put the original suite of these slides together simply to make this explanation and make it clear why we need to get those answers quickly. So this is where this whole thing started for us. Matter of fact, that's when we discovered, first of all, if the product owners would get back within 2 minutes, we could keep working on their thing. But if they didn't get back in 10 minutes, we'd switch to something else, and they'd lose their time slot for that day. Someone on the team said, hey, we're trying to achieve a one-piece flow, and it happens automatically for the whole team, except for when we have to go off the team to find somebody to answer a question. So that's why we really felt having all the knowledge and skills on the team was important, and we wanted to make sure our product owners were part of the team rather than some separate entity. So this was an important thing to us, that word flow. I want to show you that again. See how important that is? One more time. That is important. It's filling the whole screen and it's coming at us. I think that's important. Once we got that, so that was probably back in 2013 or so, we started thinking about how important flow is. So then we started studying flow. And what we found was there's lots of different kinds of flow. We were thinking in terms of lean flow, a one-piece flow, or a single-piece flow. But there are other kinds of flow. And the main one we found was psychological flow. And that got me a little bit worried. So this fellow here is from Hungary. I can hardly say his name, but I'm going to try. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. I think it's about correct. Is he here today? Okay. I'm not too worried, but maybe one day he'll be in the audience, and then I'll have to make sure I say his name correctly. Flow is a state that we can get into that's highly effective when we're really focused on something. Now, that's something a lot of programmers like, is to get in the zone. And then they really feel they're achieving something, and they do. A lot of us, and I used to work the first 15 years of my programming career, I always worked alone until I discovered or was shown pair programming in the late 90s. And then I started going, that's kind of a better way to work. And as I got better and better at it, it became my preferred way to work until mob programming came along. But this is the thing. It's a valuable thing to be able to achieve this flow, and I was kind of afraid, are we destroying this psychological flow in working as a team? And we talked about it quite a bit as a team, and I believe we're not destroying the individual flow. Because everybody's on the team voluntarily, and they can split off from the team and work alone anytime they want. They can go take a walk, go take a nap. Whatever it takes to keep the brain going throughout the day, you can achieve that on a mob programming team. As long as the team understands that sometimes people want to just work alone. Maybe work out a problem or work on a query or something we're going to need. Another way of having it, though, is even sitting with the team. And I used to do this every now and then. I would say, hey, I want to think about this, and I would tell the team. I'm just going to check out for a little bit, and I'm going to look up some stuff on my own computer because I want to understand a little bit better one possible solution for this. So we can still get our individual flow, but now, using my dad's techniques, I wanted a better question. And I think this is a better question than are we destroying flow for the individual? Are we getting a different kind of flow that you can get as a team? And if we are getting that, let's learn about it. And at first I couldn't find any research on this, so I started saving pictures. I would find pictures on the internet of teams working, doing things that looked to me like they were in flow. All these people are working on the same thing at the same time, in the same space, and they seem, at least some of them seem very focused on what they're doing. And I kind of like the look of this as a kind of a team. I found this picture of some teenagers learning to play guitar. So I thought, this is kind of like flow, right? I actually like this picture, but this is after they were sort of becoming famous. And I just looked up some beforehand. When they were here in Germany in 1960, 61, 62, and you watch, there's a couple videos of them from that very early time, and you can see they're achieving a kind of flow. You see this with music a lot, is a team flow amongst a group of musicians. Another thing, this is a group that's doing, this space was their innovation space. Does anyone know where this is at? Usually somebody in a crowd will know. This is Xerox PARC. So this is where a lot of the stuff that's in our modern computers came from the thinking that these people were doing, or the others that were there. This was probably, I don't know, maybe in the 80s, something way back when. But they're sharing ideas in a kind of a flow situation. And I'll share this one last. I found a lot of pictures of doctors in surgery. And this is very much like mob programming. Everybody there is focused on the same thing, which is having this operation for a patient, hopefully to save their life. This was a very famous operation that was in 1944. But everybody there has brought their own skills to this one thing. We need all those skills. Would you imagine, would you go to the doctor and say, I don't want to pay 5 people to do the work of one. If you're going to cut me open, just leave one of these people. I don't want to pay for all the rest of them. Do you think that would be a successful operation? You'd at least be screaming a lot if the anesthesiologist wasn't there. I'm not sure. I think we want all those people there. I even think that this person back here, I think might be a supervising a surgeon, or maybe he's going to move in a minute and do something else here, because they all have their job. And here's a technician and another technician. This, I think, looks like somebody controlling the respiration. I'm not sure everything that's going on here. But you can see they all have their skills, and they're going to use them in just the right way at just the right time. And this is a big part of what mob programming is. And then I found a study written by this person, Jeff van den Hout, which I think must be maybe from the Netherlands. I should read up on that. And this was a study. I read it, and I realized this is what we were achieving. Now, these things here that I've listed are either kind of prerequisites to being able to have a team flow, or the results of a team flow, or what it's like working on a team. But this was good research, because it was helping me understand that there was a kind of a team flow. They gave it a really great name, team flow from concept to application. So this is a thing. We're doing software development. Software development is a type of product development. It's not like manufacturing. We're inventing the thing that we're writing. And if we're not inventing it, why are we writing it? Because we would just use the one we already have. So this is kind of what it's about. So we enable the team flow by working well together. The individuals on the team are interacting throughout the day without the friction and without the problems that we often have when people work together, because we practiced getting good at trying each other's ideas and listening to each other's ideas. If you take a workshop on mob programming with me, a lot of what we do is going to be practicing the skills we need to be able to get along with each other while we're working together. Now, there's a lot more to it than I can share in this little talk, so if you want to talk about it, I'll be here at the conference all week, and I'm happy to talk about this with you. So this is all good stuff. I like to share this particular picture because this is kind of demonstrates something. A lot of people will see a face in that dish. Does that look like a face? It's kind of like a smiley or a happy face or a surprised face. This is a thing called apophenia, but it's the ability of people to see patterns in things that don't actually exist. And the reason I want to share this is because I have to be careful, because I'm looking at everything from my point of view, which already is biased towards, hey, mob programming must work, or we wouldn't be doing it. So I like to share that. So this reminds you of me back at the beginning of the talk where I said, I'm not telling you what you should do, I'm telling you about what we did. So this is our thinking. It might be biased, but it's good to have your biases confirmed, right? Okay, that's actually a big problem. So there's another kind of flow, and that's flow is in lean, which we recognized, as I said earlier, when we noticed the bottleneck of our product owners not getting back to us quickly. Now, it may not just be the bottleneck isn't just the product owners, it can be other ways we get blocked. It could be the team that actually is providing us with some services, and we're dependent on them, and they're not done, so we're blocked. There's other kinds of waiting than just the question queue time. So I want to share lean in manufacturing. This is a very simplified explanation, but basically it's the complete production of a single piece or one piece from start to finish with as little of the waiting and the inventory as possible. If you can achieve that ideally, you would have, the perfect manufacturing setup. Nobody can achieve that ideally, but you can get close to it. So that's the basic idea of flow in manufacturing. So the question is, can we get flow in product development? This kind of lean flow. Well, we thought we were seeing that, and so this is the thing. I think that's a good question. I think my dad would say, hey, that's worth asking. So I found some studies on this. I wouldn't be doing this talk if I hadn't found supporting studies, right? See, that's the problem. My bias is gonna find the studies that prove what I'm saying is true. So be careful about that. I'm not saying I'm an expert. I'm not saying I'm the end of all knowledge on this. It's just what I found that seemed to support what we're doing. Now, I've read this book 3 times. I'm reading it again right now. It's really full of good information, and every time I read it, it seems I get more good stuff out of it. But there's a whole chapter on queuing, and I really love this. So he talks about the principle of queuing waste as being the primary cause of waste in product development. Now, if that's true, as you remember from that value stream map I made, if that's true, then we need to compress out that waiting, that queuing. We need to get rid of the queuing. And it happened automatically for us with the mob programming. So I'm not going to go into depth on this. These are some of the problems of queuing. If this was a workshop, I think we'd experiment with some of these things, how queuing can affect our getting our work done. But there's other problems that are related to it, and the inventory is one of them. Context switching, interruptions, distractions, all of that is related. So I'm going to define flow with software development. This is what I think of as being flow in software development. We're going to take the idea from basically beginning to end, from start to finish, into working delivered software somebody's using as directly as possible, without the waiting or queuing, without the inventory or things we're working on. And these other things I just mentioned, distractions, interruptions, multitasking. If you ever do an experiment in an Agile training or something, some trainers will bring you through some multitasking exercises to show us we can't do it. I have an experiment that I do right now where I'll play a game of chess on my iPhone while I'm walking. I'm walking to something like an engagement. And as I go, I got to win this game of chess. That's my goal. And then I've trained myself to, when I get to the edge of the street, I don't get run over by a car. And so I will miss my turn almost every time if I'm doing this. I can't focus on both things. Now, I've tried that about 50 times, and I don't think I'm going to do it anymore because I do want to stay alive. But this is an interesting thing. We think we can do 5 things at one time, 2 things at one time. We can't. We trick ourselves. And the whole team, by staying focused on one thing, we really are getting a lot done. We're getting that flow. Now, if you ever go to an Agile training and they don't put a circle in it, then it's not really an Agile training. So I put a circle in here for you. And I kind of believe that because I don't think I've ever been to an Agile training that didn't have a circle in it. So if this is true, this is kind of the way I think of it. It's not really linear, though. If we go from idea to story, we're going to learn something. We go from story to design and code, we're going to learn something. We might need to go back to the idea. We might need to go back to the story. As we go through this, the chances for learning just changes the way that we might learn. But if we can do this, take these inexpensive, small attempts at value all the time, rapidly, we can get some kind of a flow. And mob programming, this just adds to the flow of mob programming. We found that we could go from the beginning to the end of a story that could have taken 2 weeks or more when we divided it up between the team, and they're working on 5 or 6 different stories over a sprint or whatever you want to call them. And we found we could go directly. If we just pulled one and the whole team worked on it, we could get it done in 2 or 3 hours, maybe 4 hours, maybe a day, but usually not very long. We could get a couple done a day, typically, when we worked as a team. So what we found was, when we started achieving flow, we were spending time on the right things, which includes the discovery process. We're going to find out from our customers what they really want. But we were also seeing these things fade away. And these are all the things that don't add value. Now, I'll let you look at that list for a second. But it's really easy to see that we got rid of the queuing and the inventory. We're no longer doing merging. We're no longer arguing about stuff. You learn to work well together. We are not discussing rather than trying things. I've worked with software developers who might talk about something for 10 or 15 minutes that they could have tried in just 1 or 2 minutes. And I've seen people discuss things for several hours that they could have tried in 10, 15, 20 minutes. Why not just try them? Get the info that we need, then we can make better decisions. Work that doesn't need to be done. Now, in teams that aren't good at recognizing the valuable things, they do all sorts of work that doesn't need to be done. Doing the wrong thing, well, that's even worse. Failure demand is bugs, meetings, coordination, prioritizing. We stopped doing all of these wasteful things. They faded away. We just didn't need them anymore. So we enabled a lean flow by eliminating the queues and the excess inventory. So with mob programming, what do we optimize for? We're going to optimize for the flow of the work rather than the output of the individuals. This is almost a thing that happened naturally for us, but if we had focused on trying to do this, this probably would have been a good thing, but it just happened for us. It's another thing that just happened when we started working well together. We're not trying to optimize or get the most work out of each person. We're trying to get the best of each person into everything we do. So much higher quality means less of that rework later, less of the bugs to fix. We're not working on the wrong things and so on. So I think I can answer that original question. How can we be effective with 5 people at one computer? Well, we're getting this flow of both kinds. The psychological flow, and then we found that there was also the team flow, and we found that there was the lean flow. So we're getting flow plus flow plus flow. So rather than just flow plus flow, we're getting flow plus plus. So from a programmer's point of view, I think this has got to be a good thing, right? Because we all love C++. Alrighty, so I didn't invent that myself. Somebody that I met in one of these conferences shouted that out, and I said, oh, that is so obvious. What a great way to end the talk. So I think we're kind of done, and we might have time for some questions. Are there questions?
Yes, there are.
There are some questions. So I'm going to go ahead and just say this was mob programming and the power of flow. And, I found the right way. Hopefully, am I saying that correctly?